All right. This intro.
Welcome to the Love for the Game podcast. Here's your host, Reed Napper.
And welcome everybody to another live episode of the Love for the Game podcast. I'm your host, Reed Napper. Thank you for joining us today. We have a special guest coming on to recap everything to do with week 3. We're going to dig into Brent Pry being fired at Virginia Tech, as well as Deshaun Foster being fired at UCLA, and breaking down the AP poll for week 4. But before we get into that, let's hear from our sponsor, Squad Blitz. Take a second to thank our sponsor for today's episode and the official sponsor of the Love for the Game podcast, Squad Blitz. Now, if you love playing fantasy football and you love college football, now this is the app for you. Squad Blitz, the only college football, fantasy football app that you will need. It's classic fantasy football, but with the twist, you're drafting complete teams instead of individual players. You're drafting offenses and defenses relative to their passing, rushing, receiving, and defensive stats. So say you want to take Penn State for their rushing attack with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, you'll take Penn State. Say you want to take Texas for their stout defense, you could select Texas. You join up in a league with all your friends, enter the transfer portal, to make new acquisitions throughout the season. If you don't like a team and you want to switch them out, you can also make trades within the system. So, classic fantasy football, except you're only looking to, take over full teams instead of individual players. If that sounds of interest to you, download the Squad Blitz app today. Fantasy football for college teams. And upon sign up, use Love for the Game under the referral tab upon sign up. And thank you to Squad Blitz for sponsoring this episode of Love for the Game. All right. Without further ado, we're going to bring on our special guest. You can follow him on Twitter, I believe at Headgear CFB. Let me pull it up. I'm not gonna butcher this, and I also feel really bad that I don't know this. No, what we're gonna bring up Headgear Insights. We're gonna bring him up. Thank you for joining us today, buddy. How we doing?
Doing great. You were basically spot on. It is Headgear CFB on Twitter, on TikTok, trying to grow onto YouTube, but I'm just excited to be on with you and recap. It's funny how in the Squad Blitz ad read, you started to hype up Texas, and then you went with Texas defense, which is probably a better pick than trying to pick up Texas for their passing game.
That's the only thing I would pick with Texas right now. Yeah, that's the only thing I would pick with Texas. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. As we said, we're going to break down everything with week 3, a couple key matchups that happened on Saturday, as well as a few upsets. But from my point of view, they weren't really upsets. But we'll get right into that. So our first matchup, we're going to break down. Number 6 Georgia goes into Neyland and beats the Tennessee Volunteers in overtime, 44-41. Winning bets for this game were Tennessee plus 3.5 or 4.5, wherever you got it, and the over 50.5. So Tennessee came out of the guns firing in this game, jumped out to a 21-7 lead in the first quarter. And Georgia, in classic Georgia fashion under Kirby Smart, came back, made it a close game, took the lead at one point. Tennessee had a chance at the very end of regulation to kick a game-winning field goal, and dude was seeing ghosts. He had no idea what was going on. Put it wide right. Game goes to overtime. Tennessee kicks a field goal first, and then Georgia, I think if I remember correctly, it was on the first play of their possession. They scored a touchdown. So Georgia gets a huge win. I'll let you say your thoughts here first. But this was an instant classic in my eyes.
So far, the best game of the year. And what stands out to me the most is it's very reminiscent of the Georgia-Alabama game last year, except this time Georgia actually finishes. They allow the opponent to get up a couple scores in their home stadium, but you can never ride out Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. game's not over until the clock hits double zeros. And we learned that this weekend, and we learned that whether it's a make or a miss field goals are not enough to win Georgia. When it was overtime and the Tennessee kicker was able to somewhat redeem himself, I knew that was never going to be enough. So, but I think I almost feel like we learned more about Tennessee in the loss than we did Georgia with getting the win.
Yeah, I agree there totally. Especially because I had some questions about Aguilar coming in this game. This was the best opponent he had seen to this point. All respect to Syracuse and East Tennessee State. But, they're head and shoulders below Georgia. And I had some questions coming in this game about because he had been known in the past to, be turnover prone. So I was curious, how he was going to go up against this Georgia defense if he was going to revert back to those tendencies in the past. And although he did throw 2 interceptions in this game, I don't think they really played that big of enough factor to, decide the outcome of this game. I think it's more apparent that Tennessee's defense, got out to that lead and Georgia was able to, claw back, especially with Gunnar Stockton, and this being his first true road game for Georgia. He had played Texas and Notre Dame, but both of those were neutral sites in the playoff last year. So I think it was very interesting, and it shows the character of that Georgia team from the top down, from Kirby, through everyone in that team, especially falling behind early like that. And they outgained Tennessee. Georgia had 502 yards to Tennessee's 496, but I also wasn't expecting Georgia to put up 500 total yards of offense in this game. I was expecting low scoring, in the mid 20s. So, props to Georgia offensively. They definitely showed out in this game and definitely surprised me for sure.
Yeah. And I think unlike other coaches, Kirby has been able to adapt and overcome. And that's where I think he is still able to remain at the top as one of the standards in college football. And so to be able to see Gunnar Stockton, really sling the ball for 300 yards, really shoots him up in a lot of quarterback rankings. So, but I was excited to see on the flip side, Joey Aguilar, like you mentioned, be able to face a top quality opponent and still be able to throw it, pass it around well. And during the preseason, I thought that he was a better fit for this Georgia offense for Josh Heupel's system than Nico was. And I think that really was proven this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, hats off to, I think, Chris Brazzell was the one making insane plays down the field. 6 catches for 177 and 3 touchdowns. So wow. Half of Joey's stat line just comes off of Chris Brazzell alone, having 3 touchdowns and half of his yards. So, and that's another thing. No, what was that?
I was just going to say that Chris Brazzell was a guy that I had my eyes on in my fantasy leagues coming into this game. And while I was waiting for waivers to process, he was the number 1 guy on my list. And unfortunately, I was not able to snag him. But I think he is a guy that if you play fantasy football, he can be a league winner. And he is another guy that was like Jalen Hyatt, 2 years ago against Alabama. He's your deep threat for the Volunteers and is a guy that will score you points.
Yeah, and I think I've said this on the show before, but he was the only notable receiver that got any playing time last year for Tennessee coming back this year. They lost a lot of production at receiver, so he was really the only notable one coming back. And exactly like you said, I agreed with Jalen Hyatt in the game against Alabama a few years ago. This is basically like his coming out game of sorts. I feel like he's now going to be a national name going forward, especially if he's putting up games like that, against very quality opponents in Georgia. But going back to Georgia's side real quick, I think there's questions about that secondary now if they're getting exposed like that. I know, granted, Tennessee's a very good offense. They're going to want to run the ball first, bring the secondary down, bring more players into the box, and then hit you over the top like they did. But I think there's still question marks about that Georgia defense, especially if you're in contested one-on-one situations like they were, and you're at least not winning half of them. So I think there's definitely question marks there on the defensive end. I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, does Georgia have a type of defense that can win them another national championship, or we get them back to the Final Four? And I don't know yet. However, will they face a passing offense that has the same caliber as Tennessee? Tennessee and Josh Heupel has a very unique, the veer and shoot, run and shoot offense, to where they will spread you out and pass it deep if they can. But I don't know if Georgia's going to face another offense like that, to where if Tennessee exploits that defense, I don't know if another offense will be able to.
Yeah, I was just pulling up Georgia's schedule. So next they have Alabama in 2 weeks. So coming off a bye, I think that's a mutual bye. I believe Alabama also has a bye.
That's correct.
Really, Auburn will be. I mean, they do it. Auburn is a really good receiver group as well. But I feel like from what I've watched of Auburn so far, they've been pretty run heavy to this point. So, Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what Auburn can do against Oklahoma, and then what Ole Miss will be able to do.
Yeah, that will definitely be a key to how they play against Georgia for sure. Because a Brent Venable defense, I would say isn't on par with Georgia, but I would still say that's a top 10 defense in the country, at least at this point. So Auburn could cause fits. Ole Miss, you never know what Lane Kiffin. I mean, he beat them last year, so I guess that the quarterback question could be in that game, but that's a little ways away. And then Texas, Georgia Tech at the back end of the season as well. So, you see how I overlooked that Florida game? Yeah, we'll get to them later.
Before we officially, I know we're going to talk about the Florida LSU game later. But speaking of that, on the Georgia schedule is, I think a lot of people are burning their DJ Lagway Heisman tickets, and I think you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I'm no comment on that. Yeah, I'm not gonna speak about it. I'm not gonna get into that. I don't have a ticket on DJ Lagway. What are we talking about? I don't. Yeah. Tennessee's defense forced 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss against the Georgia offense, but Georgia 4 pass breakups. They got the 2 interceptions against Joey Aguilar. So I think a point I made here, Georgia still proves that they were still able to overcome all situations, and overcome an early deficit, which I think it shows a lot about your team and the character, and kind of just the willpower of the guys you have in that locker room to really prove a point, not get down on themselves early in that game, in classic Georgia fashion, just find any way to win. So do you have any final thoughts before we move on to this game, or before we move on from this game?
I think we can go ahead and move on to the next one.
All right, cool. One final point. Georgia's now won the last 9 against Tennessee. This is also the most points that Heupel had put up against Georgia in now is 4 years at Tennessee, 4 or 5 years. So instant classic, easily the best game of the season so far. You mentioned that.
I got one more thing.
Yeah, what's up?
I got one last tidbit to say about this game is many people talked about Neyland Stadium maybe affecting this game and affecting the Georgia offense. Neyland is, if not the loudest, definitely one of the loudest stadiums in college football. However, there was no false starts by Georgia but there was a crucial false start by the Tennessee offensive line that pushed back that possibly game-winning field goal. And extending onto that, Heupel is now 23-3 at home since he's taken over as a head coach for the Volunteers, and all three of those losses are to Kirby Smart and Georgia.
Huh. Well, my bet cashed. I had Tennessee plus 4.5, so I'm not going to complain there. But classic Georgia. I didn't want to say it was signed, sealed, delivered when it was 21-7, but I was feeling pretty good. All right,
that's a good ticket to have then.
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I was going back and forth when it was between 3.5 and 4.5 throughout the week, and I got it at the right time when it was 4.5. So definitely happy about that. Let me.
Oh yeah, I feel for those who had it at 3.5, because if this was regulation, Georgia scores that touchdown, they kick the PAT, and you cash that 3.5. But overtime walk-off rules, you don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Feel bad for those people, but not for me. So, next game, I accidentally clicked on week 2, but the next game we're going to get into is Texas A&M going into South Bend, and another in walk-off fashion, beating Notre Dame 41-40. Right off the top, this is the most points Marcus Freeman defense has given up in a game, which I think is very interesting for the narrative that this game plays. If you're going to give up the most points that you have in your tenure in a must-win game, in my eyes, for Notre Dame, because their schedule doesn't do them any favors going the rest of the season if they want to, make it back to the playoff. If you're giving up the most points to Marcel Reed, that's a red flag to me. All props to Marcel Reed and how he played in this game. I wasn't expecting him to throw for 360 though, and Mario Craver basically taking over this game on offense. So I'm interested to see.
Craver is a beast. I believe he leads the league in receiving yards, especially after 207 yards in this game. And I'll say, if it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to save this cup and stay hydrated, I would pour one out for the Notre Dame defense, because boy, that was bad. Everybody was hyping up that defense coming into the season, and especially this game. I think many of us expected this to be a defensive battle and for that under to cash, but that definitely was not the case.
Just another bit on my Saturday that I had the over in this game, so that cashed by halftime, and I was feeling pretty great about that. But I completely agree with what you said. I feel like most of the public was on the under in this game. You're expecting it was two pretty stout defenses. Mike Elko, known for his defense before coming to A&M, being a defensive coordinator at multiple stops, and then was a defensive-led coach at Duke before coming over there. And then Marcus Freeman has, preached, intensity, strong defensive line play, or just strong, like all across the defensive front and offensive front. Just being strong up front on both sides of the ball, and we didn't really see that from Notre Dame's side, at least offensively. And I was kind of surprised, how much they were giving up on the back end, because coming into the season, I think they were one of the top teams in return production, at least in the secondary, and that got completely exposed in this game. So now, one of the comments I wrote down is, are they really missing Al Golden that much at defensive coordinator? Because he's with
I think that's got to be the case.
It has to be.
It has to be.
There's no other way that you give up 207 to Mario Craver and you're giving up 360 to Marcel Reed, who's basically a run first quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, with as much returning production, that would be the key, one would assume, to having a great returning defense again. But if guys are steps slow learning a new system, that plays a crucial part.
Yeah, and I don't know.
So,
I don't know if Chris Ash really changed anything on defense because he was there last season, just got promoted. So why would like it has to be. I don't want to put it all on Marcus Freeman, even though this was the most he had given up under his tenure so far. But I I don't know if Chris Ash is the answer at defensive coordinator for Notre Dame going forward. So yeah, Marcel
yeah.
Reed throws for 360. I personally didn't see that one coming. I was expecting more, on the ground game here. But Le'Veon Moss had a good day, 20 carries for 81 yards, 3 touchdowns. A&M defense was okay at times, got 2 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups. Did get an interception on CJ Carr. But I think we're questioning more of Notre Dame here going forward easily, especially with the schedule that they have. But I'm curious to see your thoughts, like what other than the defense, because that's the biggest question mark for Notre Dame. Is there really anything that you saw with this offense going forward? Because I feel like CJ Carr definitely is the better quarterback going forward here over Minchie. I don't see them switching that up going forward.
Before I touch on the Notre Dame offense, I do want to give my flowers to Marcel Reed. I think in this game, he definitely shot himself forward, and even if it's just conversationally in a lot of people's Heisman ranks, I viewed him as a top SEC quarterback coming into the season. So other than just the surprise by the Notre Dame's poor performance on defense, I'm not too surprised that Marcel Reed was able to show that he's the guy. So
yeah, I agree.
He's a dude.
I agree with that. No, for completely 100%. I wasn't I would expect him to have some impact with his arm, but not to the tune of 360 against Notre Dame. I was kind of expecting more out of the running backs and him. If we're say they're doing like more read options or they're motioning Concepcion across the formation and then we're running like a QB power behind it or something, something like that.
Yeah, that misdirection, win by committee approach, to where he didn't have to shoulder the whole game yet. Somehow he just basically pulled off the shirt, showed the Superman cape, and won himself, especially that last touchdown.
Yeah, for sure. That was an insane throw too. Tight end. All respect to who was it? Nate Borkircher. His only catch of the game. Respected.
Absolutely, yeah. And I believe the commentators were talking about how he was not the intended receiver on that play, and he's a blocking tight end. Yet, guys making plays, winning games.
Yeah, now he's going to go down as an A&M legend. Walk off at Notre Dame Stadium. But moving over to Notre Dame, again, I think CJ Carr is doing everything possible on his end to will Notre Dame to be the best team that they can possible. I'm happy to see that they gave Jeremiah Love, the bulk reduction of carries, because that was another question I had coming in this game, or not as much a question, but something that I needed to see more out of Notre Dame was we need to give our best player the ball, because they didn't do that at all against
absolutely.
Miami.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and that I think probably lost them the game against Miami, and coaches don't win games, players win games, and so you have to give your players an opportunity to win the game.
Yeah, for sure. And all respect to Jadarian Price, I think this running back duo is still one of the top duos in the country. But I would very much prefer we hand the ball off to number 4, who is a outside Heisman candidate going into the season, and was essentially Notre Dame's whole offense last season at some points. But another question I had was who was going to step up in the receiver group for Notre Dame. No, true standouts. I mean, they had a couple guys at the top here like Raridan, Malachi Fields, even Love, got some production out of the backfield. But I still think, as a whole entire group, this is still one of Notre Dame's strengths, surprisingly, going forward, because that was
Is
that, I
Raritan
think
their tight end?
I
Sorry to cut you off,
believe.
but
No, you're good. You're good. I believe yes. Yes.
yeah, he's their tight end. I was just intrigued to see that he led them in receiving yards in this game. So
Yeah,
I
that is.
heard several people talk about him as a great tight end, and so it is obviously evident with him leading the team in receiving yards.
Yeah, I guess this Notre Dame team is just Michigan now. They only throw to tight ends. So yeah, I mean, that was another thing I pointed out in the preview last week coming into this game, is who was really going to step up at receiver for Notre Dame. I mean, Malachi Fields had a solid day, but I think this is still a receiver group, that could still prove a little bit. I was high. I liked the additions that they made in the transfer portal with Malachi Fields and Will Pauling coming in there, and especially adding to Greathouse and Faison. I think they had a very underrated receiver group coming into the season, and I still think there's a lot left on the table that this receiver group could make. But again, CJ Carr, and you could just look at his stat line, even if you didn't watch the game. He's doing everything possible and on his end, other than the rushing yards, but that doesn't really play a factor. He's doing everything on his end to really, try to get Notre Dame to be successful, in my opinion.
Yeah. One thing that kind of stands out, and I would have to go back and see what we were talking about their wide receiver room during the preseason, but I know that they had a quarterback competition. So if you're splitting reps between quarterbacks, it makes it that much harder for your quarterback and wide receivers to gel together, to where you're 2 games the season and they could still be trying to figure out their chemistry. And so we could be looking in week 4 or 5 and they're just starting to hit their stride together. But when your tests are the first 3 weeks of the season, your first 2 games, then it's tough.
Yeah. And as I was saying before, Notre Dame's season doesn't do them any favors. They're, at least at this moment, one, I'm surprised they're still ranked, but we'll talk about that later when we get into the AP poll. But their schedule going forward is kind of soft, at least at this point. They go to Arkansas in a few.
That could be interesting. I'm interested to see what Arkansas as a whole is this year. They had a tough game against Ole Miss, but I think you're about to say the only quality opponent that I see on their schedule that remains is USC and maybe Syracuse.
Hey, don't count out those midshipmen now.
Hey, that's true. They still have a chance of winning the American, which is the 5th team in the Power Conference, or 5th conference in the Power 5.
Yeah.
An American Conference is no joke.
Yeah, except that conference is very, very top heavy. Navy, Tulane, South Florida now, didn't predict them at all going into the season. So yeah, and Memphis is in that conversation too. So Notre Dame scheduled. They had to at least go 1-1 in these first 2 games. So trying to make up some resume with this remaining schedule is definitely going to be difficult going forward. At Arkansas, Boise State, USC, at Navy, at Pitt, Syracuse. So
they will need to run the table. What's interesting is, I don't know if you saw this flashback fact, but Notre Dame is still ranked at 0-2. They are the first 0-2 team ranked since 1988, which was Michigan. However, Michigan went and ran the table the rest of that season, finished, I believe, 11-2, winning their Rose Bowl, and finished as the number 4 overall team. So there's a chance that Notre Dame could win out and still make the playoffs. However, the path that I see that must happen for them is not only winning out, but having a good, strong win against USC, and then pray that USC also has a strong season.
Yeah, for sure. And even like you were talking about, say Arkansas magically becomes a contender in the SEC. They've looked pretty solid this season. They were right in that game against Ole Miss till the end, until they fumbled, deep into Ole Miss territory. USC is now ranked. They have played really well so far this season, blown the doors off of everyone they've played. Um, Navy, again, American Conference contender. Pitt, even though they just lost a heartbreaker to West Virginia, they could be something at the end of the season. Syracuse has looked pretty solid so far. We'll definitely see how they play against Clemson this coming weekend. So yeah, they definitely have to run the table. But we saw this happen with Notre Dame last year. They had the worst loss of any team last season, losing to NIU, and then went undefeated the rest of the season until they made the national championship and ran to Ohio State. So it's definitely possible. They've done it before. But
Yeah.
I think they at least have to go 1-1 in those first two games for sure to even have a, shimmer of a doubt going forward.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of what Miami was last year. When you look at their schedule, they finished 9-3 last year, but they lost all three of their big tests. And if, let's say, Notre Dame finishes at 10-2, depending on what their strength of schedule finishes at, it might not be enough if they lose their two big tests.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just touching real quick on A&M going forward, now ranked inside the top 10. Obviously, they have Auburn in 2 weeks now, so they're going into a bye week. Got Auburn at home in 2 weeks. So let me just pull this up. So their schedule going forward, just off quick glance, this looks kind of light, at least for an SEC schedule. Obviously, got a test against Auburn in 2 weeks, but then Mississippi State, Florida has fallen off the rails. Arkansas could be something. Also, can't overlook Mississippi State. They've played well so far. I think their next true test after Auburn, at LSU on the 25th, which I assume would be a night game at this point.
Probably, but who really is LSU? I don't know. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced by LSU's offense, despite how mad Brian Kelly got at that reporter. But looking at A&M's schedule overall, it's pretty manageable and could set themselves up nicely in the SEC standings when they only have 4 currently ranked teams on their schedule, as opposed to teams like Alabama, who I believe all of their remaining FBS opponents for their conference games are ranked. So that's where you see a difference in the scheduling parity.
Yeah, for sure. And at least from what I've seen in the SEC so far, it's definitely still anyone's race. That there's no real, 1 or 2 teams at the very top, clear favorites, and then just a random bunch of teams. Any of the teams in the SEC right now are still alive to do anything, which I think is really fascinating. We could be saying in a few weeks, if A&M loses to Auburn, like Auburn is automatically back at the top of the SEC race, or vice versa. So it definitely could go either way going forward. But again, huge win for A&M on the road, going to Notre Dame, walking it off with the last second touchdown against the Fighting Irish. And just like you were mentioning, I'm going to pull it up on the screen here, but we're going to get into should we do a moment of silence? I feel we should do a moment of silence for this next game. We're gonna give a moment of silence for the Florida Gators, because I think they deserve it and everything that's going on with that program. So moment of silence for Billy Napier and the Gators. All right, the moment's passed. Jeez.
Because you can I'm reminded of Alabama after the 2009 SEC championship when they celebrated and they wrapped up the gator. who was at Mark Ingram, I think, wrapped that up. And man, I mean, Billy Napier.
Did you see LSU's social? They posted like a roasted gator on their social.
I did not. I missed that. That is quality trolling right there.
It was like stuffed like Thanksgiving turkey, but a gator. It was hilarious. So yeah,
was it burnt like Lincoln Riley's brisket?
It looked pretty dark. I'm not gonna lie. It looked kind of burnt. I never had gator, so I don't know. I don't know how it's supposed to be properly cooked or how it tastes or anything, unless you've had it before. So
I've not. It's at the top of my bucket list for foods that I want to try.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a delicacy that I have enjoyed, and this offense is not a delicacy that many fans have gotten to enjoy. Man, this is rough.
What do we make of DJ Lagway? Because the first note I made about this game was DJ Lagway may, or is overrated.
Did you happen to watch SEC Shorts, their weekly video?
I did not know.
First of all, they put out quality content every week. I love their sketches are something that I look forward to every Monday, but you got to go back and watch it. I don't think my description can do it justice, but one of the bits in there was they basically arrested whoever recruiting service they were playing and arresting the guy that made DJ Lagway a 5-star quarterback. And I think that's got to be the case. I have not seen anything from him to justify him being a 5-star quarterback or a top 32 quarterback in the country.
Wow, top 32?
Yeah. I'm not going to do it right now, but I could probably name off 32 other quarterbacks I would rather have than DJ Lagway, guys that will be able to win you games.
Well, he's not top 10 in the SEC right now. And there's 18 teams in that conference. So, 18, 16, a lot.
I think 16.
16, way too many. Anyway,
conferences have gotten too big.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. I could probably name 10 quarterbacks that are better than him right now. For anyone that is listening to this afterwards, in the audio, playback, DJ Lagway against the LSU defense. Granted, want to make this point. First away start in his career. Death Valley at night, arguably the hardest place to play. DJ Lagway was 33 of 49 for 287, a 5.9 average with 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions. That equaled out to a 56.2 QB rating. The Florida rushing attack had 27 carries for 79 yards at a 2.9 average. Jaden Baugh, their lead running back, had 10 carries for 46 yards. Florida did not have a receiver over 70 yards receiving.
One of the biggest things that stands out right there is I understand, like I said previously, players win games. You want to put the ball in your playmakers' hands to win you the game. But I think Florida, when you have 49 pass attempts compared to only 18 rush attempts by anybody not Lagway, you are forcing him to carry the load of the entire team in a tough situation.
Yeah, exactly like you said. You want the ball in your best player's hands. I don't know if DJ Lagway is their best player right now.
That's a fair assessment.
I don't think he's their best player right now. If I asked you before the season, going or after the LSU game, that DJ Lagway would have more interceptions than touchdowns, I would say you're lying. I would have said that there's no way he would have more interceptions than touchdowns after 3 games into the season.
That
five of the 6 came in one game.
He has 6 interceptions, but only thrown a pick in 2 games. Who knows? He could finish with 10 interceptions for the season.
Hey,
and that'd be something.
Maybe he throws 35 touchdowns to 4 interceptions the rest of the season. He's right back in the Heisman conversation. He throws for over 3,000 yards the rest of the way.
Is this another Jameis Winston 30 for 30?
Dude, shit. At this rate, it might be. It very well might be. It might be at this rate.
Florida is no longer ranked, as they shouldn't be. However, I don't think they ever should have been ranked to begin with. We were ranking Florida within the top 25 in the preseason based off of hopes and dreams. Okay, I had not seen enough from Florida finishing last year and looking at their team this year and what Billy Napier can do to justify a team to be ranked and finish in the top 25. Because I don't think that's happened for Florida since maybe 2020.
Yeah, I really thought the last 4 games last year they went on that run to end the season. I really thought that Billy figured it out, and using that momentum into this season, off of what we saw from DJ Lagway and the potential that he had, I thought they had a lot, up front on both sides of the ball that I thought they were going to be able to lean on, early in the season, because they have the toughest stretch I've ever seen in my life. I thought they're going to be able to lean on that, and that's why I ranked them in the preseason. And now I feel like a buffoon for even, considering that. Because this team got blown off, like, out of their own stadium by Miami to open the season last year, and that should have just been it. Yeah. We should have just been done with it. Even if they won 4 games in the season last year.
Yeah, because I think a lot of emphasis during the preseason was that however many games, whether it was 5 or 6, that DJ Lagway started and ended the game healthy. They were undefeated in this. So a lot of people were extrapolating that to a full season. But like I said, you cannot project based off of hopes and dreams.
Yeah, for sure. Just one more thing about Florida before we move over to LSU, unless you have anything else about Florida, but we're just beating a dead horse at this point.
Beating a dead gator.
There was I don't know if you saw it, but there was, I want to say a scuffle. I didn't really see it. I kind of heard about it before the game, and then there was one in the middle of the game. So I think there's a lot of underlying issues with Florida, not just their play on the field. Their play on the field is a whole story in itself. But I feel like there are discipline issues coming off of last week when you had the whole spitting incident, and then poor time management from Billy, and then you have a incident before this game. I don't know which side started it or the extent of it, but there was something before the game. So there's a lot of underlying issues with that team, and I think it only, you go straight to the top when you're thinking about that. You go straight to the head coach and the culture that he sets in that building. What is the vibe of that team, day to day in practice and meetings, stuff like that. And it just shows. It's shown again before this game, in the middle of the game, last week with the spitting incident. I'm curious on your thoughts about that, but you look straight at Billy Napier when you think of that stuff.
Yeah, I heard about the incident in the LSU game. I did not watch the clip myself. And I'll be honest, I totally forgot about the spitting incident last week against South Florida. But that dials down to a lack of discipline. And like you said, it starts up top with the head coach. I immediately think of the great coaches like Saban, to where you don't see those types of character issues come out. And I think back to about, for those who are in the military, it comes down to, they know that it comes down to being able to be disciplined with the little things. And if you're not disciplined with the little things, you cannot be expected to win games.
Yeah. And, even the little things like with how you play and how you prepare week to week, but even the little things of, just out in society, like an example from when I played in college was, no matter, because I had two different head coaches in college. No matter who was giving the talk at the time, they always preached like you respect women, you respect the people in the cafeteria, in the dining hall. You just be a good person to whoever it is. And I don't know now, just looking at these even small instances in the grand scheme for Florida and their mass amount of issues, there's a question that comes in about Billy Napier and even the guys that he's just recruiting. Because if you're any other program, like you mentioned with Saban, I feel like Saban is looking for good character players first, let alone be an amazing player like 5-star caliber and go to Alabama. So
yeah, talking about recruiting is, I don't know if I've heard more stories about the type of recruiting that I have from who was McCready and Siskey. Those guys, I believe that they used to help recruit under Saban, and that hits the nail on the head with the type of guys that I've heard stories about them going after.
Yeah, for sure. So we're beating the Gators as we should, as everyone should. They're just terrible. LSU, because we've talked about this game for a little while.
You got it. I was going to say is that, I was just going to add that we, like everybody else, has basically beat the Gators to death at this point. But at some point, when is enough going to be enough? When are these guys going to be able to look in the mirror and, take accountability and be like, how are we going to turn this around? What do we have to do to fix it? Because you can't dwell on the past. You have to be able to turn around and be able to focus on the next game and the next practice and be prepared. So that's all I'm going to end on with them.
Yeah. Best of luck, Billy. You're on a sinking ship. You're on the Titanic right now. Are you gonna be able to survive the hypothermia in the water, or are you gonna find land somehow, some way with this team? As we mentioned this real quick earlier, with the Brian Kelly press conference. I feel like he had a valid reaction to the question, but I feel, in my opinion, it was also a fair question, because outside of Caden Durham, what running game do they have?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this is either the 8th or 9th, and that could be way off. But point is that this continues a streak of 200 yards for Garrett Nussmeier, but a less than 100-yard rushing game for the lead running back for the Tigers there. And so, like you said, I will defend Brian Kelly's response, because he gets to talk loudly because he's the winner, but he's also defending his team. But at the same point, it was probably not an enjoyable film session for them yesterday.
I mean, it couldn't have been, because, again, those running backs are just sitting there like, why am I in this meeting right now? If we're just going to hand the ball off to Caden Durham all game, I wouldn't want to be there.
What's interesting is I need to go back and I need to look and see how LSU did on the ground against Clemson. But my pregame analysis was that Brian Kelly might live or die by trying to force the ground game, but I don't know if that was the case. It was probably still, once again, offensive struggles against Clemson. But let's see here if if Nussmeier was able to basically win them the game with his performance.
Nussmeier had 248 while they rushed for just over 100 yards. So literally the same, almost basically the same stats as they played Clemson.
Very, very similar right there. Yeah. Yeah. Durham with only 74 yards on the ground off of 17 carries, which as we move on, and I know we're going to touch on the Clemson game possibly, but the further we get into the season, the less of a quality win this looks for LSU.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like we're gonna, just as we were gonna beat on Florida for all their multitude of issues. We have to talk about LSU's inability to run the ball. This was the same exact story that they had last season. You have an all-star quarterback. He has a multitude of receiving weapons here, even the running back Durham, but you still have a very clear inability to run the ball consistently outside of one dude, outside of one guy.
Yeah, because 4.4 yards per carry against Clemson. I don't think it was much better against Florida, but and I would talk about this more during the Clemson Georgia Tech game, but that's where Clemson's biggest weakness was against Georgia Tech is their inability to stop the run. So if you're LSU and you're not able to run the ball efficiently against a quality opponent, either Florida or Clemson, despite what many are saying about those teams, those are still quality opponents. If you're not able to run the ball efficiently against quality opponents yet who still have a weakness up front, then what are you going to be able to do once you get further into SEC play?
Yeah, and another thing he touched on in his answer, or the question at least, was 4-14 on third down is not, like, going forward. You're going to face way more competent defenses in Florida. So 4-14 is not going to cut it going forward.
Yeah, and I know they were about the same. I think they were about the same last year overall with their third down efficiency.
Yeah, so I feel like we've touched every point about this game. LSU needs to find a run game, and DJ Lagway is dead, and so is my Heisman ticket on him. Going to the next full breakdown we'll do. This will be the last full breakdown we'll do, and then we'll just lightly touch on a few more games. Clemson goes down to Atlanta to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech getting a 24-21 victory, walk-off field goal. Brent Key is now 7-1 against AP ranked opponents.
I did not realize that, and that is insanely impressive and a stat that nobody's talking about.
He was 6. I said it in the preview. He was 6-1. I think I misspoke and said ACC opponent, ranked ACC opponents. It's just ranked opponents, period. But now I don't know if you looked at the box score for this game. So fun fact, Haynes King out through Cade Klubnik yardage wise, and he outrushed their leading running back by himself.
I never would have guessed that he outthrew Klubnik. Yeah, out of all of the stats this weekend, that might be the most surprising. Because my thoughts in my notes for this game was that the biggest weakness, like I mentioned before, for Clemson was their inability to stop a run. You look at how they finished last year. Shout out to puntandrally.com. That's how I get my team analysis from. And I was looking at their team breakdown last year as I was previewing not only this game, but the LSU game. And they were, I don't have the rank in front of me, but they were atrocious being able to stop the run. Basically, they couldn't stop molasses in wintertime. So that's how I expected Georgia Tech to be able to win this game, was Haynes King and the King brothers in general being able to put their bodies on the line and rush and outgame the Tigers on the ground.
But the funny thing is, it was just Haynes King, because I said that in my preview too. Like, if they're going to account more for Haynes King and his ability to run, I think Jamal Haynes has a big game. It was the other way around. They accounted more for Jamal Haynes and let Haynes King run wild. Clemson, 8 tackles for losses. They were pretty efficient on third down, went 7 for 12. But the glaring stat here, they had 2 turnovers to Georgia Tech's none.
Yep. That's typically a stat that will decide the game for you.
Third down efficiency and the turnover battle, for sure.
Actually, I think I misspoke previously when I talked about the LSU offense's conversion on third downs last year. I believe it was more that the LSU defense was giving up third down conversion rates compared to the Clemson offense was not able to convert on third downs when I was doing that game preview. So I wanted to correct myself on that, because once again, like you touched on, Clemson wasn't able to convert on third downs.
Yeah, for sure. And I've touched on this a couple times before. Now, this was Adam Randall's best game, converted wide receiver at running back. I'm done with this. I'm done with this experiment. Dabo. I'm over. Like, I don't know who else is in that running back room for Clemson off the top of my head, but we got to give other players some chances here.
So I'll defend Clemson, and I know William Cockrell will be able to speak better on this than I can. But my preseason preview for them was that out of their, I'll say top 3 running backs coming into the season, Davidson, I think, is a true freshman, and then the other 2 guys got hurt during the preseason, offseason. So their running back room was very barren coming into this year, and that was one of my glaring weaknesses for this team, along with trying to improve the defense and specifically their rushing defense. So you can only, even the best chefs can only cook so well if the cupboard's barren.
Yeah, I mean, those were the two things, that really stuck out to me, when I previewed Clemson preseason too. I put them number 1 in the preseason, just solely off their returning production, though, because they had the most returning production in the country.
Yeah,
they added a really good defensive coordinator in Tom Allen, which I thought was going to be, a big factor in improving, being able to stop the run, and it clearly hasn't. Once again, I'm being proved that preseason rankings don't mean anything. It's just it's just something for us to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, you're not the only one there. I had Clemson. I didn't publish official rankings, but I had unofficially, I had Clemson at least within my top 4. So and they were one of my 2 legitimate title contenders this year because of their returning production. But it's hard for us to expect them to make leaps and bounds over one off season if the guys in the room is not truly who they need.
Yeah, for sure. I have nothing else on this game other than I just wanted to pose one question to you and get your thoughts on it. How much pressure is on Dabo now going forward, do you think? Because I don't think he gets fired. I think he's done too much to that program and that university to get fired. But I think he's definitely going to feel some pressure going the rest of the season for sure.
What's their remaining schedule?
I know they don't have
Before I,
Miami.
yeah,
They don't
before
have
I speak on
Miami.
that, I just wanted to look at
They
their
have
schedule.
yeah. Yeah, you're all good. So they have Syracuse this week at home. I know they have I knew they had Louisville on the back end, Florida State, Louisville back to back now looks
Yeah.
crazy, and Louisville on a short week. That looks crazy now. So Syracuse this week, bye week, UNC at Boston College back to back, SMU, Duke, Florida State, 3 straight home games, or SMU bye week, Duke, Florida State, Louisville, Furman, and then South Carolina. So
that's a tough stretch. Thankfully for them, they don't go up against Miami.
mm,
That Florida State game is at home, so that could be a difference maker for them. Um, like like Notre Dame, their playoff chances are slim but not existent. I think Clemson still controls their path, and they could once again, like they did last year, backdoor themselves into the CFP with a conference win. And if Dabo were to win the ACC again in almost similar fashion like they did last year, that the burden is definitely lessened. And like you said, they're not going to fire him. He's done too much. He's had too long of a success at Clemson and is one of a few coaches, maybe more than a few, but there are only a certain number of coaches in the history of college football who have won multiple national championships. And Dabo Swinney is one of them. So
yeah. I think he's definitely going to feel some pressure going forward the rest of the season, especially that 4-game stretch. SMU, Duke, Florida State, and Louisville. That's a huge stretch in their season of how, if they stay at ACC contender or, fall short, because Florida State came out of nowhere from the preseason. Georgia Tech, I had him in the ACC championship game preseason. I actually had this matchup in a rematch in the ACC championship game. That looks stupid now. But Miami is definitely,
you could be spot on.
I definitely think Miami's the I don't want to say the clear favorite, but they're definitely the favorite in the ACC now based on how Clemson's played so far. Also, not a fan of them. Might have been the purple jerseys. I'm not a fan of them.
How are you wearing your colored uniforms as the away team? How did Georgia Tech allow
that? If I were Clemson, I would have just worn the home jerseys. I would have just worn your home oranges on the road. But
does Georgia Tech normally wear white at home? Am I oblivious to that?
Yes. No. Yeah, they wear white at home, and then their away jersey. Okay. They have a navy jersey and a gold jersey. I don't know what their primary away jersey is though. But they do wear white at home. I know that. Mainly from college football 26. Mainly from college football 26 because I had a dynasty with Georgia Tech. Anyway, we got a couple more games we're just going to quickly gloss over. We're not going to dive as deep into them. We got 75 people watching live right now. Appreciate everyone, tuning in live. We're just over an hour into the show. Go make sure to follow Headgear at Headgear CFB on Twitter. He's a great follow. Gives great insight, and there's definitely some eye-opening posts that he gives about the world of college football. So go make sure give him a follow. And if you're watching on Twitter, make sure to retweet the stream. Gets more eyes on it. It's all college football all year round. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Also, make sure to go subscribe on YouTube because we're also live on YouTube right now. Arkansas at Ole Miss. This was a closer game than I expected. I thought Ole Miss, I don't want to say off of a scare last week, but I thought they were at least going to cover the spread. But that's another story. I got caught by the hook. Anyway, Ole Miss, I thought, would win this game by double digits. Arkansas definitely surprised me in this game. I'm very surprised with how Taylor Green played. Over 420 yards of all-purpose offense just through him. Arkansas might be a player in the SEC. Could play spoiler to someone's season. I'm curious to see what you thought about this game.
Yeah, I just want to lead off by saying that when it comes to fantasy football, Taylor Green is the number one CFF quarterback. He leads the country in total fantasy points and fantasy points per game. He's the top quarterback. And so in my home league, I was going up against a guy who started him at quarterback. And I was pretty nervous. Well, I started off the game feeling confident. Ole Miss was up by a couple touchdowns, and then Taylor Green started to lead the comeback. And they were driving. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I'm going to lose this matchup after Arkansas and Taylor Green scores a touchdown. But thankfully, he threw the pass, and the receiver fumbled the ball, and Ole Miss was able to secure the win, and I was able to finally get my first win in my fantasy home league. So thankful that Arkansas did Arkansas things and managed to choke the game away because they had it.
They had a shot. Where did they fumble? Where was that fumble? It was around the 20.
Something around there, yeah.
Yeah, punt.
Yeah, because they had it, 2-minute drive. They had it underneath the 2-minute timeout. Yeah, there it is. At the Ole Miss 27.
152 to go. They had a chance to win that game. This could have been a completely different conversation. We'd be saying Taylor Green's in the Heisman conversation if they won this game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he still very much could be because he's played really well, but it would have been at the forefront if they won this game.
Yeah, that we would definitely be having conversations about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss if they had managed to fumble this game away, because I believe they were up by at least 14 at one point in the second half. I might be wrong.
They were up 10 at one point, or 13. They were up 13 right here, 41-28. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn.
So I still have my doubts about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, especially after what they were able to do in fumbling their high likelihood of going to the CFP last year. But Trinidad Chambliss, I mean, that guy was playing D2 football last year. He is a
Ferris
baller.
State. Shout out Ferris State University.
Yes. That is a program right there. Yeah. They're a good D2 school. But what was that? Over 400 total yards for him in this game. Handful of touchdowns there. So I don't know what's going on with Austin Simmons. I know he was taped up and hurt pregame and couldn't play this game really. So I'm interested to see what the future looks like for who's going to be the lead quarterback for them moving forward. But if there wasn't already, there certainly is a quarterback controversy.
Yeah, completely agree with that. That was actually one of the notes I put on this game is Ole Miss could be all right with either quarterback. Trinidad Chambliss? I don't know, but if you're throwing for 350, you got my attention. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had. Other than Arkansas outgained Ole Miss, for total yardage, which I also was not expecting coming into this game. They rushed for 220.
SEC shootout.
They rushed for 220. Like, what? That's unreal.
I think both of these teams are more so known for their offenses.
Yeah.
Or at least are now.
Hey, if I'm if there's any other takeaways from this game, hey, if Sam Pittman, because a lot of people have been thinking that this was his last season with Arkansas, that they're going to move on. If it is his last season and they're playing like this, at least competitive in every game, good for him. They're going out with the fight under Sam Pittman. So, props to him, because I wasn't expecting it. Not at all. Yeah, you got any final thoughts on this game? Trinidad Chambliss. Trinidad Chambliss is the story. He's insane. Vanderbilt going to South Carolina now. So, yeah, I don't really know where to start with South Carolina other than Sellers got knocked out with a concussion, and they only scored on their opening drive and then did absolutely nothing the rest of the game. Vanderbilt's legit, and Theo Vaughn is going on a date with Pavia's mom, so good for him.
Only if Theo Vaughn could hook Pavia up with a date. I forget who it was, but Pavia tweeted about it today that Theo Vaughn's got to hook him up. So, but we were all wrong about Vanderbilt. I think most of us looked at Vanderbilt last year as like, all right, cool, it was a good run while it lasted, and a lot of us laughed at what Diego Pavia said during SEC Media Days. I'm not going to take it as far as saying that I agree with him, but they are definitely a lot better than what Vanderbilt was in the past.
Yeah, man. I mean, just look. I mean, a lot of these are also receivers. There's no way they have this many running backs on their roster, but 37 carries across 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players. And whatever this is, 9 players got a carry in this game. Over 140 yards rushing.
Yeah, that is that's misdirection and triple option right there.
Yeah.
It's great to see teams like Vanderbilt. Yeah, it's great to see teams like Vanderbilt and Georgia Tech being able to excel at the triple option, and that is such a dangerous offense. We're seeing that if it's ran right, it is very dangerous.
Yeah, completely agree, because it's so hard to prepare for. You have no idea, so much misdirection and everything. It's so hard to prepare for. And if anything, this just proves that South Carolina really lost a lot defensively, because that was a big storyline coming into the season, that South Carolina had a lot to replace defensively, and that was very obvious in this game. Outside of the offensive struggles, for sure.
Yeah, that was my biggest question about South Carolina coming into the season. Was it seemed like last year they had a great defense. They were just a year early on quarterback, and this year everybody's talking about Lenora Sellers, but you could tell that they were losing a ton of production on the defensive side. And if they weren't able to find a good marriage with that, they could possibly waste Lenora Sellers.
I think I agree with you at some point. A lot of what was going to be relied on with Lenora Sellers, outside of his just normal athletic and physical ability, was what they were getting at receiver. Because outside of Nick Harbor, what I couldn't name any receiver on this depth chart outside of Nick Harbor. And I think
there's nobody on there that jumps off the board.
Oh no, not at all. A lot of the offensive production was going to be through Sellers, maybe Faison, because he was a notable transfer running back from Utah State. So I don't know. I don't know where South Carolina goes forward, especially if Sellers is going to be out for a little bit of time.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't. I haven't heard the latest
are we saying
updates
South
on
Carolina's
him
dead?
with his injury.
Are we saying South Carolina's dead?
I think South Carolina. If Sellers is out for several weeks, I would say yes. I lump in South Carolina and Florida. They're very similar in my book about how I grade them now. So
Yeah, we put a lot of stock into both of those quarterbacks at Florida and South Carolina, and that's not proving to be the story here for either of those teams. South Carolina was, lost the turnover battle 4-1, turned it over 4 times. They were 4 for 12 on third down, had 8 penalties for 85 yards. So it wasn't even just the offensive struggles with Sellers. It's just turning the ball over, not being able to sustain drives. So a lot of different factors for South Carolina. We don't know where they're going. Forward, and they have a huge test this week. They got Missouri on the road coming up this Saturday. So, yeah,
I think it's funny how going into this game, you could see the common opponent between Vanderbilt and South Carolina was Virginia Tech. South Carolina needed a blast of special teams to beat VT in Atlanta during week 1, yet Vanderbilt went into Lane Stadium and outgained Virginia Tech by, 300 yards in the second half, I believe. And so a lot of people, Josh Pate especially, questioned why South Carolina was ranked at 11 and Vanderbilt was unranked coming into this game. And so I was really intrigued to see, are the power ratings going to be right as to defend South Carolina's top 25 ranking and Vanderbilt's absence, or were we going to get proven right by what we saw on the field? So,
yeah, completely agree. Shout out to Clark Lee. He's completely flipped around this Vanderbilt program, and now they're arguably must watch every week now because with at least with Pavia at quarterback, they got a shot in every game now. Honestly, you can't overlook Vanderbilt how you would in the past years for sure.
I went ahead and looked at Vanderbilt's upcoming schedule. They are favored against LSU and Auburn because both of those games are at home. We are not prepared for an 8-4 Vanderbilt if they were to pull those off and win all of the other expected games.
Hey, does a 9-3 Vanderbilt get in the playoff?
I'm not ready. We're not ready for that conversation. America as a whole is not ready for that conversation.
I mean, they do have a gauntlet going forward. They got Georgia State and Utah State their next 2 games, and they got at Bama. They're going to be locked into that game for the revenge of last season. LSU at home, or Missouri at home, at Texas, Auburn at home, Kentucky at home, and then they finish the season at Tennessee. So it's a gauntlet, but hey, who's to prove Diego Pavia wrong? Because they're trying to win a national championship.
Yeah.
So, last game we'll quickly touch on. South Florida and Miami. I mean, I just completely read this game wrong. I was on the South Florida bandwagon, and it came to a screeching halt. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this game. Miami's a legit contender for not only the ACC but the national championship, and that was very clear in this game.
I'll be honest, because of the extended rain delay in this game, I forgot about it. And because at the rain delay, wasn't it like, what was it, 19-6 Miami
Something like
or
that, yeah.
somewhere around there? And
Mhm.
then I look up next thing after I've gone ahead and replaced that game with another live game, and I look up and it's 42-9 Miami, and I was like, oh wow, Miami is better than what we thought they were going to be. Kudos to South Florida, and good for them for being in the AP Top 25. But I don't know if they truly belong there. We will learn more about their week 1 and 2 wins against Boise and against Florida as we see how bad those teams really are. But it was good. It was good for them to be able to, be ranked and have some respect. I love Byron Brown. I think he's a beast at quarterback. They were just completely outmatched in this game.
Completely agree. I love Byron Brown. I said this last week when I was recapping their game against Florida that he just has the play style of, someone you would want to rally around and even, sacrifice your body and do whatever it takes to win, just based on the competitive, nature of how he plays the game. He just plays like a leader, and that's very clear, on the field.
He is
South
who
Florida.
we hoped DJ Lagway would be. I'll go ahead and say it.
Never. Hey, someone has to say it. I'm glad it's you and not me. South Florida had 27 carries for 40 yards in this game. So, as we expected, that was a big talking point about Miami coming into the season, is how they were really, really big up front on both sides of the ball. And that played clear in this game. The rushing edge 205 to 40 in favor of Miami. So also shout out Carson Beck. I've said this before, but he's proven me wrong in all types of ways, because I completely overlooked him coming into the season. I didn't think he was going to do much of anything coming over from Georgia. So he's arguably a top 5 quarterback in college football right now.
I doubted him coming into this year just because there was a lot of unknown around him, while also knowing that he wasn't completely at fault for Georgia's not failures but faults last year. That wasn't entirely on him when they lead the country in drops. So
we lead the country in drops and didn't really have much of a run game as we would know Georgia to have in the past with Kirby Smart. So I guess when you have legit receivers who can actually make plays, and another thing, most of these receivers are young too, which I think is even more fascinating.
Tony was tied at the top for receptions, Malachi Tony, and he's a true freshman, but is going to be a star.
Yeah, he's legit. If anything, if that one-handed catch he had against Notre Dame was anything to base him off of, yeah, he's a freak. He is a freak, and he's going to be really good.
My biggest takeaway from this game, though, is that this is not going to be the last time that we see South Florida. I think they have a real shot of being the G5 contender. Really, it's going to be whoever wins the American. But I think that could be South Florida.
Who did you have as the G5 rep before the season?
I'll be honest. So I didn't publish any official rankings, but unofficially, my CFP was, I just threw Boise as a default because they're the Alabama of the G5. So I don't think you can fault anyone that put Boise into that G5 spot.
Yeah, for sure. That was completely valid. I mean, I was between Boise, and then my eventual pick was Tulane. I think Tulane
That's
was the best team. Was the best team on paper before the season in the American, and I just think, based on their schedule that they had a couple quality opponents. We'll see Saturday. They go to Ole Miss.
Mhm.
I think they can be
They just
competitive
beat
in that
Duke.
game. They just beat Duke. You know,
They beat
Northwestern,
who.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Northwestern isn't a quality opponent by any means, other than the fact that they are a Power 5 opponent, and can be a Power 5 team that Tulane says that they beat. So I'm really excited to see Tulane against Ole Miss. I think it will be a not to the same extreme, but a possible similar situation to South Florida and Miami, but it should be viewed as a quality loss for Tulane, despite if for those who hate that phrase. And I'm normally one of them.
Yeah, I think Tulane will be competitive. Just real quick, I was about to bet they opened at plus 12.5 underdogs against Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost took it, but I'm gonna, hold back on that at least for now. Initial thoughts, I think that line is way too large, way too big of a spread to open up. Personally,
yeah.
But we're gonna touch on some firings in week 3. We're gonna start with UCLA firing Deshaun Foster after they started 0-3 this season, lost to New Mexico this past weekend. Also paid him $1.5 million just to get their ass beat. So good for them. Went 5-10 in 2 years, lost 43-10 to opener in Utah. Lost to UNLV, lost to New Mexico, 35-10 this past week. I'm sure Nico is loving his choice of chasing a bag to LA.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I feel bad for the kid. He listened to the wrong person trying to not even give him advice. He listened to the wrong person there. And kudos to Tennessee for winning what basically was a quarterback trade with UCLA there. Not
1,000%.
And I hate associating Joey Aguilar with UCLA, a school that he never even took a snap at, because Joey Aguilar is an Appalachian State quarterback. But he just happened to be there during the offseason when that essential trade was made.
Yeah.
So
completely agree. I mean, did he even enroll? I don't even think he enrolled in the school.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Question I was, thinking about that I wanted to get your thoughts on was what is the identity of UCLA going forward here? Because
I don't think there is one.
I have no idea.
You hire, like it touches here on the article, Foster was a former All-American running back for the Bruins, and he was I believe the running back coach right before he was named as the head coach after Chip Kelly left there. But they, in my honest assessment, they hired a guy who wasn't fit for the job. He was in way over his head, but it doesn't help when you have leadership above you and above the AD, like the chancellor there, who does not seem to be invested in football.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always said that UCLA is more of a basketball school than anything. You've got the legacy of John Wood in there, but I don't know what to take of them as a football school, being forced to travel entirely and halfway across the country for conference games. So,
yeah, that definitely plays a big factor. And like you were mentioning, they're more set up, at least NIL wise, as well for basketball. I don't know how much the school is investing in NIL towards the football team. Obviously enough for Nico Iamaleava, but that's pretty much it. I don't know if you had read any of the articles that were put out about this, or some of the candidates that some people are proposing to take over for this job. I wrote down just a couple that came to mind. USC defensive coordinator Danton Lynn, if he wanted to stay out west. I know, right across town to UCLA.
Mhm.
So that could be a thought. Boise head coach Spencer Danielson, if he wanted to take another step up, but I mean, he just led Boise to the playoffs. So I don't know if that's something he would want to do. One I was kind of intrigued about, and you could call me, bullish on this, but I wrote it down. LSU defensive coordinator Blake Baker.
That is the first time that I've heard that name. And do you have anybody else on your list?
I also wrote John Summerall, but I also have him for the Virginia Tech job that I think he's more likely, if anything, to get or be more interested in.
So I'll say this about both UCLA and Virginia Tech at the current moments. I think Virginia Tech is a higher tier than UCLA because, like I mentioned, UCLA has no identity whatsoever. Virginia Tech, I think, still does have an identity, or there's at least more history there. However, speaking to the names like Danielson at Boise State or Summerall at Tulane, you mentioned that it would be a step up. However, look at the state of the programs, specifically UCLA. I view that as a step down. Now that the G5 has a seat at the table for the CFP, what you can build at Boise or at Tulane can possibly or could possibly project you to a power conference, and you're building better at those schools than taking a new job and having to start all over. Because I believe, too, isn't Boise going to join the Pac-2, going to be the Pac-10, whatever it's going to be? Basically the Mountain West on steroids. So whether it's Danielson at Boise, Summerall at Tulane, or I forget now off the top of my head, some of the other G5 coaches, them leaving there, I view that as a step down. And so I would be highly surprised for them to make that move to either UCLA or Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was just, I was just spitballing names, honestly.
You're not the first person that I've heard throw those names around. So
yeah, and I agree with your point of Virginia Tech, easily being a more, worthwhile position to take than UCLA, especially at this point. At least Virginia Tech invests in their football program and wants to see their football program, get back to the heights of where, they were with Michael Vick and Tyrod Taylor when they were there, which is actually one of the names that I proposed for the Virginia Tech job, because he is now coaching with Norfolk State. It would be a massive jump to go from Norfolk State to Virginia Tech, your alma mater. But I think you get the name recognition with that. He knows he knows a winning culture and mentality from when he was there. So I think that would be something he'd be able to implement. And he was successful at the highest level as well in the NFL. So I feel like he would also be able to bring back, former players and coaches that he was with. So I think that's definitely a possibility in my eyes. I wrote down Alex Golish, but he seems to be a very hot name right now, especially based off the early success from South Florida this season. I think it's unlikely, but I threw it out there. I threw out Summerall as well for this job. And obviously a clear one everyone's going to throw out with this job, and the former great head coach of Virginia Tech and Frank Beamer, his son Shane Beamer from South Carolina. I don't know, but it has to be thrown out there with the name recognition for sure.
Yeah, I heard that circulated earlier today with Beamer, but once again, of all places, that would be a significant step down for him. Golish is definitely a hot name. And I think out of the three schools with Boise State, Tulane, and South Florida, I am high on South Florida, but I think out of the three of those, that is the lowest rated school. I think that he has the opportunity to take a step up.
Yeah, for sure. Just lastly, UCLA owes Deshaun Foster $7 million because he signed a 5-year contract and they fired him in the middle of the second season. Brent Pry is owed $6 million by Virginia Tech, and as of today, a 30-day transfer window open for both those schools. So,
yes,
hypothetically, they could not even have enough players to field a team going forward the rest of the season. For either
they could
of
be
those
like
schools.
Marshall and the bowl game they were supposed to play. And that actually leads me into something important that I wanted to touch on is that with UCLA and Virginia Tech, they want to be able to take the next step forward. And firing a coach in the middle of the season does nothing good for you in that scenario, other than the fact focusing on no other fact than it opens up the transfer portal window, like you talked about. So regardless of how the Florida fans feel about Billy Napier, it is in Florida's best intention for him to finish the season, regardless of if they go, 1-11, and he needs to finish the season and then fire him in the offseason and get somebody new.
Completely agree. So yeah, week 3, and we're already talking about coaches getting fired. You know, tough business. But when you suck, you suck. Also think Nico has a very high chance to leave UCLA now going forward. I don't know what he's being paid.
Boy.
I don't know what he's being paid, but I could see him. I could see him jump ship now.
Yeah, because he could, because he's doesn't have a red shirt, right? So he could preserve a red shirt because he hasn't played 4 games or 4 or less games, and he could jump ship and go somewhere else because of that coach's transfer portal rule. And I thought coming into the season that, last year Purdue was atrocious. They still might be relatively bad, but they're not going to be as bad as UCLA.
Is that a prediction?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. UCLA will – I'll go ahead and make the prediction now. UCLA will finish as the worst Power 5 team. We can circle back to that.
I like it. I had Stanford as the worst Power 4 team before the season. So
I believe, according to at least Bill Connolly's SP Plus, Stanford is the worst Power 4 team, but I think they'll make some improvements during the season. Andrew Luck, even though he's only the GM, will help them in the right direction, and I think they'll finish above UCLA.
That's fair. So. I respect it. We are going to end the show briefly touching on the AP poll, just giving some brief thoughts about it. I thought Georgia would be ranked higher than 5. That's the first thing I saw. And also, how does Florida State jump 3 spots when they didn't play and they're still above Oklahoma? I don't know. Just a thought.
I don't know if we got kids listening, but I'm going to try and make this a family-friendly show with the amount of things that I would want to say about that, because Florida State, so they jumped 3 spots this week, and they jumped, I believe, 7 spots last week after playing an FCS opponent and doing what they should have done, and by smoking them. I'm not impressed by you moving up 10 spots by playing no FBS teams in 2 weeks. I am not opposed to Georgia being within the top 5. They control their destiny. And what would we be saying about them if that Tennessee kicker had made the field goal and Tennessee had won? Looking at the game as a whole, I don't hate that move. And I'll go ahead and lead by saying that I also don't hate Notre Dame being in the top 25. Many people want to hate on the AP voters especially after what happened last week. But when you look at power ratings and Bill Connolly's SP Plus specifically, again, he has Notre Dame as the number 22 team. And so I think there is plenty to defend their top 25 ranking. And so to summarize that, we basically have to find a good marriage between combining power ratings with teams that have open up tough games, and while also rewarding wins and losses. And we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, completely agree. I think there also has to be another factor of like just simply, and there's a bunch of people, especially in the college football space, that talk about this. You need people that genuinely watch the games to some extent, because another thing I've thought about, and personally I view them lower at this point in time. And I'm a Penn State fan, and I'm going to say this: they should not be the number 2 team in the country right now.
No.
They have not shown anything, nor have they played the competition to warrant their number 2 ranking. LSU should be above them. Miami should be above them. Georgia should be above them. I would put Oregon above them simply because Oregon beat another Power 4 team 69-3. Like what are we doing?
Yeah, and I think we are still early enough in the season to where you have those preseason expectations baked into the ratings. And I don't know if they will ever leave, even if it's week 14, but it's still early enough to where you have that baked into the season, into the rankings themselves.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's another team I was going to.
No, who are you going to touch on?
I can't remember who it is now. We can come back to that though.
you don't want to talk about Michigan?
I mean, if we're going to, I can. I think they are.
I have my own thoughts about them, but
I think they are where they should be.
I think they're a little high.
I think they were probably a little too. I think they were a little too high coming into the season, along with Alabama. That's where you have the expectations coming into the season, and then it was that reality check against Oklahoma for Michigan, but that game went as what should be expected for a team that is still trying to figure out their identity. And I've harped on teams to where I'm not impressed with their performance against lesser opponents. And that's exactly what happened with Michigan this past week with Central Michigan. Now, when you have, they're going to play against Nebraska this coming week in what some are calling the best rivalry trophy in college football. You got the Bussin' Bowl, thanks to Taylor Lewan and Will Compton. But that is, in all seriousness, that is a hinge game for both of those teams. I think that will set a win or a loss could be a season-defining impact for both of those teams. So,
completely agree with that. I think at least the Oklahoma game for Michigan was kind of like, they're checking the temperature of the water. Like, has it reached boiling yet? Have we reached the max amount of potential that we have? And I think this game is more of like a telling point for Michigan. Exactly how you said, their season could either implode, or this could just be the kickstart of what could be a really successful season for Michigan. And I think another point to bring up about Michigan, especially going into this Nebraska game, Bryce Underwood at least is going to learn from that tough environment. He's going to learn from the mistakes he made in that game. I think there's a chance they lean a little more on the run game, even more than they did in that Oklahoma game, simply because of that factor of, he is still young. He's still, is going to have some, I want to call growing pains with, adapting to college football, especially in in Lincoln. That's going to be a very tough environment again. So I think they're like exactly what you said. I agree. This could definitely be a turning point in both those team seasons. And exactly how the sports books have it right now too. I think it truly is a pick'em game because both these teams, I think, are very very comparable in a bunch of different ways. So I think that might even be the best game on the slate this weekend, personally, other than say like Illinois, Indiana. I think has a chance to be very good as well. So
Illinois, Indiana is where College Game Day should have gone.
1,000%.
It was a business decision to go to Miami, Florida. And look, ESPN is an entertainment business, so you got to do what's best for them. You got to make selfish decisions sometimes, but for the sake of the sport, you got to go to the better game. And you got Indiana, Illinois, you have Oklahoma, Auburn, you have Utah, Texas Tech, or you have Michigan and Nebraska. And I know College Game Day was just at the Michigan-Oklahoma game, so you probably don't want to go to two games that close. But that's three other games, top 25 matchups that you could have gone to. So
yeah, and I think they only didn't go to Utah, Texas Tech, which I think could throughout the season, especially with how Arizona State's played as well, that could be the Big 12 game of the season. Even based on games that are going to happen later in the season, I think that game is going to be insane. I think a part of the reason they didn't go to those spots, one, Utah, Texas Tech, that's going to be big noon. So I think they just didn't want to interfere with Fox because they know at some point they're going to have to interfere with Fox down the line. They're going to go to the same place.
They did that week one, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So. And I think there's definitely chances down the road that happens again. Indiana, I was kind of surprised. I feel like if Corso was still on the show, they would have gone to Indiana only because of his ties to the school. But I think I agree with you. That was the clear game to go to this week for game.
Like I view when I mentioned hinge games for Michigan, Nebraska, this is a hinge game for both Illinois and Indiana. It's not. I don't think it's the biggest game for either one. But when I'm looking at hinge games, I'm looking at this game will either set you up or knock you down. A win here for whichever team will give them the momentum and confidence that they need to be able to continue the success and continue their momentum when they face tougher competition.
So. Yeah, completely agree. Also love that Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt finally are getting the recognition that they deserve. I personally have ranked Georgia Tech this whole season. I've had them ranked since before in preseason. I had them ranked. I think they should have been within the top 25 this whole time. So I'm glad they finally get the recognition. And it only took Vanderbilt to be a ranked team to finally get ranked, even though, again, like we touched on before, the same opponent comparison between them and South Carolina against Virginia Tech, they absolutely murdered Virginia Tech compared to South Carolina did. So
they also deserve to be ranked. Both of those teams deserve to be ranked.
Yeah, for sure. Just two more quick points I thought about. I like how they didn't move Tennessee because that was a very competitive, close game. Arguably might be the game of the season. So I'm glad that the consensus vote didn't move Tennessee at all. And like how you touched on before, I'm glad that they kept Notre Dame ranked because two of those losses were both one possession losses. One of them was on the last play of the game. I think going forward, Notre Dame will still be ranked unless they slip up again on that schedule that we talked about. But I think it's very respectable to keep them ranked because those two games are arguably better than half of the teams above them's scheduled to date outside of USF when they were ranked. They had played 3 ranked teams at the time. Tennessee's played a top 5 team. Miami's did play a top 10 team. I'm glancing at the schedule. Florida State at the time beat a top 10 team.
Let me put it this way. Looking at Oregon's schedule, off the top of my head, I know they have Penn State, and Illinois. Let's put a comparative third. Well, I'll just leave it at those two. They play Penn State and Illinois on their schedule, and they could go 0-2 against them, but they space out those games. If they started the season with both of those games, do we view them in the same light as we do Notre Dame? Like, Notre Dame's only knock is because they started off their season, their first two games, against what are now top 10 teams, instead of spacing them out like most teams happen to have on their schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my takeaway with that.
No, I agree. And I don't know if that's really something to blame them for, or say that they did go 1-1, like, you know, I was projecting them to. I had them losing to Miami the first game, but then, you know, beating A&M at home. I think it's definitely, you know, again, if we're going to take anything out of this AP poll, you know, that's positive, I'm glad to see that Notre Dame was still ranked for sure. Because they've had
big controversy, but I agree with it.
Yeah, completely agree. You have any more final thoughts on the AP poll before we wrap up the show?
The one thing that I'm going to say, and you touched on their scheduling, you know, you made a comment about, you know, I don't think there's anything that Notre Dame could be blamed for their schedule. And I'm going to be as respectful to Notre Dame and Notre Dame fans as I can, even as a rival Michigan fan. But you know how this can be prevented? If they were to join a conference, they wouldn't have to play both of those teams, more than likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'll just end it on that.
Yeah, but they never will join a conference. Never, ever.
No. And I started to tease, I give them all the respect. There are only a handful of teams that are able to do that. And Notre Dame is one of them. And I have matured my opinion about that. And so I am starting to give Notre Dame more respect for them remaining independent.
For sure. Completely agree with that. So as we close out the show, you have any final thoughts on week 3 or going forward here? And where can we find you on all the social media?
Yeah, so I think my biggest takeaway from week 3 is that the more football we get to watch and get to enjoy, and the more teams play, the more we will be able to figure out the proper rankings. And that's probably a good thing why the CFP doesn't start ranking until about week 7, I believe. So they have actual good quality data points to rank these teams by. So I guess to say, like, I'm excited for more football and more things to talk about with each team. So excited to continue the conversation, not just here, but on Twitter is my main social media. Hope everybody will check that out at Headgear CFB. So
yeah, everyone watching live right now, we got 83 people watching live right now. Make sure to go follow them at Headgear CFB. I appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your evening to join me. Remember to follow myself on TikTok, Instagram, at X at LFTGpod01. Listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. The link is down in the description below, or in my bio if you're watching on Twitter. And shout out to our sponsors, Outlier and Squad Blitz, for sponsoring this episode of Love for the Game. Appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Thank you, Headgear, for joining us again this evening. And we will see you guys later this week for the preview show for week 4. Thank you for joining us. Have a good rest of your week, and God bless.